What's the difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening? Today, live on The View from a Pew.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 855-244-0077. That's 855-244-0077. Now, here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
4 minutes after the hour on What a Day, What a Day, What a Day. It is The View from a Pew, live on 99.3 KTIA. Also on webcast1live.com. We know you have many choices of programs that you can listen to or watch at this time of day. And for whatever reason, you've chosen to give us an opportunity to entertain you, educate you, enlighten you. You know, and I'd like you to do the same for me. Phone lines are always open. It is your voice I want to hear. 1-855-244-0077. You can also jump on the chat as our chat master is back. Bob Monster at the Cat in the Hat watching the chat. Where have you been? You've been missed.
Well, I was at a conference in Altoona at the Racetrack Conference Center.
Ooh.
And it was on trauma of law enforcement and dealing with law enforcement death and how to deal with survivors. And it was good. It was
for law enforcement officials?
Well, any law enforcement officer.
Okay.
You know, we lose between 140 and 160 a year in the country.
Yeah.
That are shot or killed while on duty. Car goes off like we had Trooper
Tony. Down by 169 or on 169.
Yeah. And so when that happens, we are learning what the surviving family members go through and how to help them, you know, to survive. And we also were dealing with critical incident stress, you know, how to deal with stress associated with critical incidents. And we had a person that came to visit us that was shot in the line of duty, an officer, when he was in his 30s. And he was shot, Dan, you would not understand this, but with .357 hollow points at 6 feet away, shot in the face.
Well, I'm very familiar with the round because I own a .357.
Yeah, and he survived, and he was there at the conference.
I imagine he has a big hole in his face.
Yeah, and he's basically, they said he would never see, he'd never talk, he would never walk, he'd be a quadriplegic, and he's doing way better than they ever expected. His mind is good. He was speaking to us, and his wife, you know, is his caretaker, and she will be for life.
Ever and ever.
Is he still blind?
No.
No?
No,
Well, that's good.
He could see, he could hear, he could talk.
How bad is his face? Is it pretty bad?
No, it's pretty good. He's in pretty good shape.
Good.
But he is paralyzed on one side, and they say he'd never walk. He walks, not very good, but he walks. And so he was there explaining what he went through, what the situation is, and all of the work it took for him to survive that. He going through all of the physical training and the agony of that, and his wife that left her job to be his caretaker. It was quite a big impact.
Well, we don't think about the families of our emergency responders as much as we should. I mean, these people risk their lives every day. They go to work, and their spouses have to wonder if they'll return. And I bet that's a scary position to be in. My heart goes out to those people.
Is the stress and the anxiety of losing someone who's serving in state patrol, police, something like that, different than that if I lost my wife in a car accident?
Well, there are similarities and there are differences. I'd have to answer that by saying that if you are, you know, married or are married to someone in law enforcement, you always have in the back of their mind that you could lose this person or this person could be shot and disabled because of their line of work. And so you don't have that, right? You know, you don't have that fear, Mac, within you or Dan, you know, because you don't have that type of occupation, but they live on a daily. Their daily life is lived with the fact that that person could be taken away from them at any moment. So you have stressors within the family, and then you have to consider that law enforcement people are trained to be in control of their situation and to control people, and then you have to live with your family, and so there are difficulties and strains on the family itself. If the officer's working on a night shift and they're dealing with bad guys all the time, it's a different type of stressor. But so there are similarities if you suddenly lose your spouse. You're going to go through the shock and the grief, and there are many similarities in that sense. But like Dan, you were saying that, we're not putting our lives on the line for others out there.
Yeah, we're not inviting it in any way. They actually have a really high rate of divorce in the police departments. I know we had a friend of mine who his wife became a police officer, and they sat down with him and said, "Well, are you supporting her?" And he said, "Oh yeah, no, this is great." He's like, there's a 90% divorce rate for female officers, and sure enough, 5 years later, he was divorced.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean,
what was the deal?
It's a high stress job. You end up, I think part of it is police officers in particular end up with a camaraderie amongst each other, which leaves their spouses out because they don't understand the kind of trust and support that they get from each other, and it causes problems in the relationship.
Well, part of the problem too is that you're not going to speak about the daily people you have to deal with,
right?
Because you don't want to traumatize your family with stories. I mean, I was in that situation. When I go on a disaster, I don't come home and tell my kids, guess what I saw when I was out there, because it would traumatize them. And so you tend to relate better to the people that you've worked with. You can talk to them. You know that they've experienced similar things that you have.
Okay, time out. Hold on just a second. Talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old. You come home from 9/11 and you think that telling your children about the things you saw there would traumatize them?
Yes.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I doubt
think they
you.
would traumatize me. I don't want Bob to talk about it. Heck, my dog died and it put me down for 2 days.
Yeah, and when you see the carnage and what happens to people, in those situations, you don't want to talk about that. The things that we see that other people have seen out there, the horror of it, I mean, it's worse than a horror movie. And you know what that does to kids when they see these horrible things on TV that are made up.
Okay. Yeah, Bob's got a job that not very many people do, and there's a reason. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and so you carry a lot of these things that you see and the hurts that you see, and it's difficult for you to talk. You really can't talk about it, and so you tend to be close to the people that understand you and who those people happen to be.
Those are
people you work with.
coworkers. Yeah.
And so, you do things with them all the time because they have an understanding of your life and where you are and what you think. And so if you go out with people that are not in law enforcement, you have things that really you don't have things in common. And then you're treated differently. If people know, if you have a friend that's in law enforcement or is a cop, what do you do when they're around? Do you treat them the same as you do all your other buddies, or do you treat them differently? Most of the time, they're treated differently if somebody knows.
I must be different than most people.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I have a buddy, Tyler Tompkins, who's he's a detective over at Johnston. He used to train with me MMA. I don't know that I treated him different, but you ask him different questions than you ask normal people. The conversation is wildly different.
And you'll act different, meaning that there are things you won't do because this person's in law enforcement.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it. I mean, I don't do anything really that I'm worried about law enforcement. I'm sure that was
Not
true.
now.
Yeah, I'm sure 12 years ago, me and Tyler would have had a lot more tame conversations than I would prone to have. But the only thing that bothered me was when we spar, I felt like he was free to kind of beat me up a little bit more because if I got out of line, I was beating up a cop or something. But I don't know that ever was real. I mean, it might have been manifested in my mind. So spiritual experiences, though.
Are you trying to change the subject?
I am trying to change the subject back to Christian radio, as it were.
Well, nice to have you back, Bob. Chat is open and love to have you there.
Yeah, we missed you a lot.
So, and this kind of goes with recovery, because one of the things that steps 3 and 6, 7, 11, and 12 talk a lot about spiritual awakenings and spiritual experiences. And I'm just curious about if we are all King David, he's got his mic on. If we are all bold enough to share some spiritual experiences that we've had in our own life, if we would share things that were spiritual, and then could we talk about whether they were experiences or whether they were awakenings? And by the end of the hour, I'd like to have that definition. Now, I've been having this conversation with myself for a couple of weeks. So I in my mind, I framed this conversation. But I'm curious to see what other people think, especially those of you at home and listening on the internet. 515-244-0077. And if you're anywhere in the continental United States, it's 1-855-244-0077. And you can also jump on the chat and share it with Bob, and he'll share it with us. So somebody here share a spiritual experience. And then let's determine whether that was an experience or an awakening.
Well, for me, I think there is a difference because I have a number of spiritual experiences, but the awakening came when I, realized it was a point in time when I realized who God was, and really is, and it didn't ignore him.
Have you only had one spiritual awakening, do you think?
No, I would have to say that, when I became aware of God, when I became aware that, there was a need for him in my life, and I welcomed him, into my life, then that would have been, an awakening.
Right.
Understanding that. But then I think then I had another awakening, so to speak, which was more of a call to, walk that narrow path, to make a decision that you were going to continue on that path and follow the Lord, to be more intimate. So that was another awakening. And then once you get past that awakening, in that sense, then you have experiences. Now, that's just for me. I'm not saying that. Some people can be awakening and have an experience at the same time.
Well, what about this, though? What if awakening doesn't stop? I mean, for the Christian, when we're looking at sin, we peel back a layer of sin only to find another layer. We continue like an onion, ridding ourselves of these sins. I think the awakening happens the same way. I'll actually tell a story. Do we have enough time? We do. I remember back in the deepest part of my rebellion, I was at a destitute place. I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I owed some people some money. My roommate had just kicked me out. I really had nowhere to go, and I remember crying out to God, God, I cannot do this. I have to leave everything to do this. I need somebody to do it with me. That's kind of a silly challenge to issue to God. Give me somebody, I'll go willingly. God, in His providence, a few months later, had me in a car with who is now my wife, talking. She was the girl I was dating at the time, talking about Christianity, and we realized we had similar beliefs and that we were both wanting to go back to church together. And for me, that's that moment, my spiritual awakening, where I realized God was actively working in my life and was calling me to Him. But that awakening hasn't stopped. I mean, it keeps building. A few years ago, my mother died, and again, I experienced an awakening, so to speak, or a continuation of that awakening.
Again, you said experience.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Spiritual experience.
Well, there's an experience that goes along with that, but I don't know if that's necessarily tied together. I mean, there's sometimes where you're thinking about something and you go, oh. But even a thought that pops into your head is technically an experience, so I don't know if we can separate them completely. But, thinking about my mother's death and reflecting about that, I realized I wanted to live as a Christian, and what does that mean? Now, I had been a Christian for 7 or 8 years, but I'd never really looked at the consequences, and I was already living under some of the consequences and some of the benefits of it, but I wasn't consciously and actively trying to be a Christian first in all things. And now as I try that, and I'm not perfect at it, I'm not saying I am. People are going to catch me all the time being less than perfect. I think I'm continually awakening. I don't know that it's I ever hit some point where I'm fully awake. Maybe I do later on in life. I don't know, but I haven't yet.
Okay, so that's a great start to this conversation. Both these men have hit on an idea of what I want to talk about. What's the difference between a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience? And can you share the ones that you've had and define the differences. Bob Montserrat, Father Tattoo, King David. I'm Mac. We'll be back live here on KTIA, Iowa.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you choose to obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio, Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
The only way we come to know the Saviorship of Jesus Christ is by bowing and acknowledging that He is Lord and King over all the earth.
Jesus Christ died on a cross, paid the penalty for our sin, and by repenting of our sin and accepting Him by faith, what He did for us, we are forgiven.
Salvation is not a combination of faith and works. Salvation is by faith alone in God.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
21 minutes after the hour on this gorgeous afternoon. Bob Montserrat, the Cat in the Hat, back watching the chat after 3 days gone. Father Tattoo in the host seat today, as well as King David producing. And yes,
he's doing a good job.
He's doing a great job. He's done a good job all week. Done a better job than my normal producer.
I know. That guy's a bum.
And I have always given nicknames to people that I work with on the air to create an individual personality for that person on the air. And sometimes it grows to be, their air name for many, many, many years, decades. But we got to figure out a nickname for Dennis McCauley, who's been coming in. Mm-hmm. His nickname is, what is it? Smack.
Smack.
I'm not doing a recovery show with a guy named Smack.
Yeah, Smack is a euphemism. Isn't that a word for heroin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, he's a motorcycle guy, so we have to think of some of that.
Well, he's a drummer. He's also a drummer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a musician.
You'd call him Skid Mark if he's a motorcycle guy.
He's very much into recovery, and he's very much a Christian. So we just got to work on that. Nothing. I don't want to do Dennis the Menace. It's just that makes you Mr. Wilson, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, don't forget at 4:00 today. Art Smith is here, and Brad Zahn's legislative show will be today. A lot to talk about that's going on Capitol Hill, not only here but in Washington. So we'll have that conversation. Today on The View from a Pew, we're talking about the difference between spiritual awakenings and spiritual experiences. And I don't think there's anybody on the air with us today that says there's no difference, right? I think everybody recognizes there's a difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening.
Well, I think there would be, some people would have different definitions. I don't think everybody's going to agree. Even though I can agree with Dan says, he can agree with I say, it just means that you're looking at it in a different way.
Well, without a doubt, if you have a spiritual awakening, it somewhere qualifies as an experience.
I think the experience, here's where I would say that why they are different. An experience doesn't necessitate a change. An awakening is a way of saying something changed. You can no longer go back. You changed your state from asleep to awake. Whereas an experience, you can have an experience and say, whatever.
But if it was truly spiritual, you might not react that way.
I would tend to say they probably go hand in hand. But you know what? We know that God has revealed himself to people, and they've been unresponsive, right? We can see that scripturally. So, in a sense, not necessarily.
Yeah, and I had let me give you an example of experience I had that really kind of turned me on. It didn't awaken me, but it was just a confirmation of who God is really, and the fact that he speaks to us. But I remember at one point I was in prayer, and I got the thought in my mind that I needed to send a monetary gift to this couple. And I wasn't sure, and I asked, well, what should I send? And a figure was put in my head, and so I wrote a check, put it in the mail. I just said, Lord directed me to send this to you, and I basically forgot about it. Probably about a week later, I get a letter of thanks from this couple, and in the letter, the husband said, he said it was around Christmas time, and we were really short on cash, and we needed money, to get stuff for the kids and so forth. And so I got on my knees and I prayed to the Lord, and I said, Lord, I need X amount of dollars. I need this amount, and thanks for that. And he says the very next day, when I went to my mailbox, there was your letter, and I opened it up, and when I saw it, he said, that is exactly the amount of money that I asked from the Lord. He says, I knew that you would, I would say, you won't believe this. He says, but I know you would believe that.
Yeah, and what's even more wonderful about that is you obviously had that revelation from God before that man dropped to his knees and said, I need this number.
Exactly.
Because you had 2 or 3 days in the mail.
Yes.
So that just shows you the incredible power of God to know what he was going to pray for.
Yeah.
And I'm always willing to accept any money you feel called, given, inspired to give to me.
Well, the Lord has to do that, and before that ever happens,
I'll start praying that God starts putting that in your heart to give me your paychecks. I'm fine with it.
But I had another instance that happened just a few months back where, I was walking out of the laboratory, and I had loaned money to somebody, within the laboratory, and it was over a year, and I never got anything back, and I wasn't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
But the thought that came to my mind was, when you receive this money from this person, I want you to give it to this other person. And I thought, okay, that was the thought in my mind. That came out of nowhere. I wasn't even thinking about it. The very next day, I walk into work, and as I'm walking by, that person that owed me handed me over the cash and said, here, pay in full.
Here's the money I owe you.
Yeah, and I was shocked because I got that notification the day before without any indication, and I was told exactly what to do with it. And when the next day, again, I was just no plans. I wasn't even expecting
You
anything.
were just a courier.
Yeah, and then the next day, boom, over a year that I had not had any, payback, and then the very next day it happened, and I knew that's the Lord. He gave me direction on what to do. I didn't even have to wait for it to come and say, what should I do with this? Which is normally how it works.
And see, here's what I want to know, and none of us can answer this. But what I want to know is, how can someone not say that was Holy Spirit driven? I mean, give me the best atheist out there, folks. Somebody call all the best atheists and say, here's your chance to challenge God. Call Mac and Bob and Dan and King David and explain to them why you getting a feeling that this person is going to pay you back this money. No, you didn't hear that. You just heard you were going to get an amount of money and to immediately pass it forward.
No, what I heard was the I'd loaned this person a while ago.
So you knew the person that you loaned it to was going to be the source of the money.
Eventually, right? I just didn't know when. It was more than a year.
And it was the next day.
Very next day after I received that message.
See, these are the things that, this is Machism 3. Coincidence is God's way of revealing himself. And you just can't tell me that that's not a clear sign. People are all the time saying, well, where's God in life? Well, there he was right there. Ask the guy that you gave the money to if that wasn't a God thing. Because my guess is they needed that money that God had told you to give to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. That was definitely the case. Right. Because the person I gave it to at the time, admitted that their checking account was in the minus.
Yeah.
And they had no source of income whatsoever coming to them.
Yeah.
And so there was a need that was there, and it was another believer, and I was the one. And so the Lord looks back and forth, looks for people that are tuned in and listening, and will follow through. I can tell I have a lot of them, but I had a person call me because this person was going in for open heart surgery the very next day, and they asked me to pray. I prayed over the phone. I prayed over the phone for the healing of this person that was going in. I went through all the tests, did all the stuff. They were going in because there was a blockage. And then the next day, I received a phone call early in the morning because they know I get to work at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, my phone comes off. It was that person that went in for open heart surgery. And the person was going absolutely ballistic. When they went in, they did the final test, and they said there was absolutely nothing wrong. Everything was totally clear. And that heart was like brand new. So how do you explain that?
Well, you either say that,
it's
what they heard before, the what do you call it, was wrong, and he never needed the surgery.
They could say that, sure. Using all of the techniques and all of the, what they do for determining blockages.
Yeah.
And found nothing.
Nada.
And that person, I believe me, that called him, were praising God for that healing.
Good. Yeah, I prayed with a guy over the phone on Monday or Tuesday night, and it isn't odd to me. It just isn't. If you pray for somebody, who cares how far the prayer has to go and what vehicle you have to use to get it to there? Whether you write it on a Post-it note or you text it or you email it or yeah. What does it matter?
And the thing is, are you afraid to pray for somebody because, the person may not get healed? I don't even, that's not my concern.
Yeah.
That's not my concern.
Right.
It doesn't matter. So I don't have any fear. If I'm directed or somebody asks me, I can pray for that person, and the Lord's going to do what he's going to do. I
think this is something a lot of Christians, they get weirded out when we talk about God healing things. But in essence, I think a lot of times we limit God as to what he does in today's time or in the context of the day. And while I think in general God allows the medical field and stuff like this to handle the brunt of healing, it is not beyond his power to heal people.
He gives us that knowledge.
And it's perfectly acceptable and useful to pray for these things, to say, God, I want you to heal this person. Now, I don't know. I know there's some people that will then say it's bound and it'll happen, and I think that's horrible hermeneutics. But I think God can and does respond. I mean, look at Dan Hudson over there at Pathway Church. Mm-hmm. They said, you're going to die one day. You're going to be walking down the road. Your heart's going to literally explode. You got an aneurysm. It's a done deal. He walks into the studio the first day we interviewed him when I was here. I think it might have even been his first time on your show.
Yeah.
And he goes, I just got off the phone with my cardiologist who says, I can't explain this. I've never seen this. This doesn't happen. Your body has healed itself. You're fine. Clean bill of health.
Right.
And it's one of those things I remember going, well, people said, I'm going to pray for you. And I'm like, God doesn't work like that, but you do what you want. He's a big God. I believe you can do whatever. And it's like, we really have to trust that God will provide, and sometimes that providing is not healing. Sometimes there are things,
right.
and sometimes it is, and what we're supposed to do is pray and be faithful and believe that we serve a God that certainly can do that.
When I'm on the Hope prayer ministry team, and so once a month I go to a hospital and pray for a half a day with half a dozen patients or whatever. And it's always hard for me to say, but I always say, please God, heal this person in this life or the next. And a lot of times that'll throw people off. I've never been challenged by it, but I've been told by the people who have trained me that that's okay to say. That's okay to say because that's a genuine prayer. You're asking God to heal this person either in this life or in the next. And in the next life, of course, we will be healed.
Yeah. Well, the Lord likes to deal with people His way, whatever that way is. I don't know circumstances that happen to be within people, and I can state what I would like to see happen. But again, that may not be the Lord's will for that particular person. They may need to go through the wilderness. They may need to, experience this so that they can see what the Lord wants to reveal to them. But it still doesn't. I have no problem, praying for someone for healing. But I also understand that may not be the Lord's will at that time for them in their life.
Yeah, I mean, the only objection I ever have is when people say that God must respond to this one way or the other. And God is God, and we do not direct His will. God directs His will.
Right, and I think He will respond. It's just that it's not going to not necessarily respond the way we ask.
I mean, like there are some people that go out and like anoint you with oil and say, "Oh, you're going to be healed." I grew back an arm once, and then I fell out of their socket and I put it back in. They have all these supernatural things, and I tend to be really skeptical of those. Because they're really saying they can direct God's will. I think God's done amazing things. I was at the hospital, was it last Wednesday? Was it last Wednesday? No. I don't know, last week, and I saw a 1 pound, 1 ounce baby that was alive. God can do amazing things.
Yeah, I always say God will answer your prayer. It's either yes, no, or not now.
Yep.
All right, we're coming back. King David's going to share one of his spiritual experiences or spiritual awakenings when we come back. That's live here on 99.3 KTIA. And speaking of praying, make sure you pray for the folks at the Truth Network. Everybody needs your prayers, but they have a great ministry and they need your prayers right here at webcast1live.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Well, hi, I'm Rob Spearman. I'm a broker-owner of RE/MAX Real Estate Concepts in Des Moines, Iowa. Give us a call if you're looking at buying or selling a home, or if you're having trouble on your mortgage payments or looking to purchase foreclosures. We have the agents to help you, experienced, outstanding agents. Our office number is 515-276-2872. Or if you'd like to look at homes, go to our website, homeconnectusa.com.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
the ones in the pew, not pulpit. Come on now, let's reason together. The phone lines are open, so call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
A couple of ideas for you. Don't forget, Friday night, tomorrow night, the Real Men Conclave, the Rising Sun Church in Altoona. No cost to you at all, 7 to 10 p.m. We hope to see you there. And then next Wednesday, it's Testify for the month of March, and we'll kick off with Lance Farrell's testimony live there at Incredible Pizza, 86th and Douglas in Urbandale. We hope to see you there.
Is he going to do any taekwondo?
He may. He may. I'd like you to come and be the board.
I was going to say, I'm not going to go. That guy's a dangerous cat.
He is. Sexiest man at 50. Anyway,
I'm not comfortable making that statement.
Well, I got 60 sewed up, so he can be 50.
Okay.
Well, that's what the Register said. Remember, he was on the front page of the Register for his 50th birthday.
Oh, I haven't. I don't read that. I don't read that rag.
All right, so that's Testify next Wednesday, March 6th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock at Incredible Pizza in Urbandale. All right, today we're talking about the difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening. And what's the difference? Is there any? And we're talking about them amongst our staff, and so we thought we'd go to our newest and greatest new producer, King David. And David, can you tell me one of your spiritual awakenings or your spiritual experience?
I would say that in my mind, it's hard for me sometimes to think of like spiritual experiences as anything other than like miraculous things. I was raised charismatic, Pentecostal, and so I was very used to the idea of everything spiritual being this sort of outlandish, stuff. But I guess my real spiritual awakening, I guess, is when I got saved, because although I was raised in all of that, I wasn't really saved. I didn't know what it meant to be saved. So I think that my spiritual awakening was when I got saved in 2005 or 6. I was in Corpus Christi, Texas with some friends, and a friend of mine was sharing the gospel with these people, these teenagers on the beach, and I was just kind of standing off to the side listening to them, and for whatever reason, I'd heard the gospel a million times before, but for whatever reason, it just kind of dawned on me at that moment that I wasn't saved. And I would say that was my real spiritual awakening.
Okay.
Because I was I believe at that moment, that's when I was saved. Because I responded to the gospel. I understood the gospel, God calling me, and I responded, in faith to that. And so I would say that was my spiritual awakening. But at the same time, that was an experience. So
right.
But
that kind of goes with what I was talking about.
Yeah.
That you really can't have an awakening without an experience, but you can have an experience without an awakening.
Yep. No,
now,
I'd agree with that.
I would say that the awakening kind of kicks off the rest of the experiences. You know what I mean? Because I think you can have spiritual experiences before you're saved, but you don't really get it maybe. It doesn't really click what it is. And so after you're saved, your eyes are open to spiritual things. And then so after your awakening, you recognize experiences for what they are, rather than, oh, that was weird or that was random. Now you kind of know, like, oh, I think that was God. Maybe that was a God thing or whatever.
And you can go back in time and say, hey, that was a God thing, but I didn't recognize it then. I didn't notice it then because I wasn't awake to spiritual things.
Now that's an interesting. I don't know if I've had any of those where I look back and I say, don't let me put words in your mouth, Bob, but what you're saying is where you look back and you say, oh, now I can see how God played into that.
Right.
Oh, I mean,
I'd have to have those.
Yeah, you would
I?
almost. I mean, Mac, for me, give you an example, so maybe you can kind of think of it in a less supernatural kind of perspective. But my mother dying, this. We bring this up a lot. It's obviously something that's on the front of my mind because it's tied intimately with my walk with God. And looking back, I remember when my mom first got sick, and I went to the pastor and said, "Don't teach me anything. I don't want God to teach me anything here. This is not how I want to learn." Looking back now, I see all kinds of stuff. God used my mother's life and death to accomplish that. I wasn't in the moment. I was too close. I couldn't see past the bombs. I wasn't seeing the whole picture. I was just seeing the explosions that were happening in life. And once we get out of that battlefield and we look back and we survey over it, we can see everything that we went around. We can see the ones that hit us, the ones that missed.
All right, here's a tough question for you.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Sometimes we believe, let's say that. Bob, jump in here if you think I'm wrong. But sometimes I believe, I'll just speak for me, that I might be here for so far 53 years. If I die tomorrow, almost 54 years, for one single moment in time. That God sent me here to be there for someone in one single moment of time. It might be something that I say on the radio today that is a nugget of wisdom and shines the Holy Spirit's light on this person, and I die in my sleep tonight.
It could be. I don't have a problem with that.
So
I think, though, yeah, I agree with that, Mac, but I wonder if there's not multiple. I mean, I don't know. Yes, that can happen. Absolutely.
Okay, so did your mother, was her purpose on this earth to not only bear you, or bore you,
whatever,
bear you, to die to bring you to faith?
Well, it didn't bring me to faith, but it definitely a strengthener in my faith. But she affected so many other people. I mean, there's other stories where my mom played roles. I mean, even amongst people we know today that'll come up to me and say, your mom helped me with this, and I was doing something the other day, and I remember your mom involved in this process for me. So I think that's true. She definitely existed to fulfill these parts of God's will, but I don't know that it's just one single. Okay. But perhaps it could be. What about the baby that's born to the couple that's been trying for 10 years to have a baby, and it lives for 10 minutes and dies, and then those people through that learn the suffering of Christ and come to faith through that experience. That baby's 10 minutes of life very well could have been the purpose. I mean, it would almost have to be, because there's nothing else it accomplished. So yes, it could be. In my mom's case, at least I can only speak for my mom's case, but I have brothers and sisters, and she played roles in their faith too. She was active in the church, and so there's ladies at church that have had effects from this. And of course, she was a school teacher, and so she has all these children that she's affected throughout the years. And so my mom, and I don't want to make my mom a saint in like the Catholic tradition, but in my mind, she's a saint. She just did so many things and affected so many people that it put a lot of responsibility on me to be my mother's son. And I do a poor job of that. But I think, like you, Mac, you've done a lot of things for a lot of people. Nobody's going to say this was Mac's defining moment. You've had a lot of defining moments, brother. I mean, I don't know that God put you on earth just for 1 minute. You've been put on, or just for one thing. You've been put on the earth and accomplished lots of things.
Well, and that may be, but I want to go, and I thank you for that. But I want to go back and say something real quick before we get to break. When somebody dies, and someone who loves that person, we never know what to say or do.
Never.
I'll bring you a casserole, and I know what you're feeling. Yep. What can you say?
Don't bring me
You just said the most important thing you can do. In 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, go up to that person one time and say, hey, I want to tell you how your mom touched me one time.
That is, for me, that is the most rewarding thing people did. I mean, and the church surrounded us at the time, and I certainly appreciate that, but it is definitely, for me, the person that goes, here's something your mom did for me. And we've had, papers she's filled out to her, letters she's written that have come back to us. And those touch me 10 times more than, at the funeral, a flower.
Yeah, I got goosebumps. There's the nugget of wisdom for today, folks. For those of you who have always wondered, what do I say or what do I do when someone I care about has a loved one taken from them, don't do anything right there. Love, embrace, pray, give them grace. But 6 months down the line, 6 weeks down the line, 6 years down the line, remind them of how that person touched you in your life. And that's the blessing God gives us today, to know how we can help heal the sick and comfort the hurting. We're coming back live here on The View from a Pew on KTIA, Iowa.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
If you choose to obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
We've got questions. You've got the answer. Join the conversation. It's your voice we want to hear. So call 855-244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
10 before the top, Salem Radio Network News, and then Michael Mudloff with True Blue from Westbrook Presbyterian Church. I am getting this straight from America's election headquarters, Fox News. Breaking news, and I'm not kidding. Okay, I'm not kidding. Conservative talk show host Steve Deace says he is considering a bid for the U.S. Senate of Iowa if Republican Steve King does not enter the race.
Well, we know Steve King's entering the race. That's like...
No, we don't.
That's
no,
silly.
We don't.
That's silly.
Deace says, I have been approached by people across Iowa to consider this race, he told Fox News. I have been approached by people outside of Iowa to consider this race. The best path to victory in 2014 is to establish a conservative like Steve King to run for the Senate. Deace says King is uniquely qualified to do that, the seat vacated by Democratic Tom Harkin. Iowa-based radio show said Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds cannot unite the state party. Deace claimed neither can anybody connected to Governor Terry Branstad. Go ahead. I'm listening.
God bless Steve Deace, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I take that about as serious as you running for Senate, Mac.
Well, I can tell you that Steve Deace will one day run for office. I can tell you that.
I am sure Steve Deace will at one point find a way to truly humble himself by running for office and getting 2 votes. I will tell you, Mac, that you got more votes as president than I think Steve Deace will get for that position.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think Steve Deace could...
He got the Self-Righteous Media Hog Award at City View. Nobody in Iowa likes this guy, including a lot of conservative Christians. Now, I like Steve. Steve is a very sharp guy. I think he's a good political commentator. I don't think he needs to jump in the ring. I don't want to badmouth Steve and say, oh, he would be awful. I would even consider Steve. But I don't see this as a good move for Steve.
Well, yeah. You gotta, if you're gonna run for office, you have to start someplace.
Yeah, go big or go home, I guess. I mean, I guess I appreciate that about him. I just don't. To me, I don't think that's a very serious bid. I would be very surprised if he was being overly serious.
Well, you were here yesterday. We had Doug Gross on. Doug Gross does not think that Steve King can win. He thinks he could win a primary.
Yeah, no,
but he doesn't think he could win the national election, and that would take Steve out of his congressional seat. He'd be gone.
I think Steve King should stay where he's at.
Well, but then who on the Republican side is going to run? That comes down to Northland, Gross, Reynolds. I mean, there just isn't a lot of people out there.
Sure. Yeah,
I don't mean to talk about politics.
Well, no, that's a huge development. I mean, I guess on one note, now that the sticker shock's kind of worn off, I like Steve Deace. I like what he stands for. I think that he believes what he says he believes, which is something that's unique to him that doesn't exist in politics today. But I don't see him having a chance. I mean, I really think that would be. I think for him that would be a blow to his ego. You know, I just...
What's a blow to anybody's ego to lose?
Well, and that's
like that.
I'll never run for office, A, because I hate politics, and B, because I don't care to get beat up that bad.
Well, I think Doug said it yesterday. He said it's the only thing you can focus on for that period of time.
Sure.
You can't focus on your job. You can't focus on your family. You've got nothing else.
That's my next question is, what's he going to do for a job? Because you can't be a radio host and run for office, I thought.
Here's what he may have to do is give up his Iowa affiliates.
Okay.
He might not be able to be on any Iowa radio stations.
So we can start bad-mouthing him here on KTIA. No,
we say what we want about him. But I don't know if he would have to vacate the airwaves. He's in 60 markets, so the other 59 markets, I'm not sure he'd have to vacate that.
I guess he wouldn't have any effect there. Yeah, that's a really, I don't know. Bob, what do you think about that?
Bob doesn't care. He doesn't even vote.
That's not true. I voted.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not into the politics to watch. I know that, he polarizes people, and
you either love or hate Steve
Obama.
Deace. Yeah.
So did Obama.
Yeah,
Obama polarized
I'm not
people.
saying that's bad. I'm just saying that that's what I see, and he would get votes.
Well, I'm the 2 votes things probably. I'm probably just being.
Yeah, because I'd vote for him, and so would his wife Amy. So there's 2.
Yeah, you would vote for Steve?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. You have to remember, I've known Steve for 20 years. I gave Steve his first job in radio.
Okay.
And I take no pride in that. I'm humbled by the fact that I got the opportunity to see and hear his talent in the first place. I believe in Steve all the way down the line. There isn't anything I don't think Steve could do that would make me not support him anymore.
Well,
I have for Steve the same kind of grace that I hope God has for me. Because I am anything but perfect, and neither is he. Yeah. But I believe in that man. He's a good man.
Well, I'm not contesting. I like Steve Deace. I actually, from my interaction when he was first here, when I started, he's a nice guy. We talked a couple times about theology. Theologically, we agree more or less. I like the guy. I don't see that as a good move for him. Just any way I wrap my mind around that, he is not well liked enough to pull that off. I think he will lose a lot of his radio career in making that move. And I don't know if you can resurrect that. I mean, once you walk out of that spotlight, I don't know you get to go back.
Of course, Mike Huckabee got into radio after he ran for president.
But see, Mike Huckabee used his presidential candidacy to get into radio. I don't know that Mike could go back, try to run for president, and then come right back. I don't think that would work.
Well, Reagan never came back.
Yeah, Reagan never came back, but Reagan was like 106 by the time he was done.
All right. Well, I'm just giving you breaking news. Steve
that's
says
crazy.
that if Steve King does not put his name in the race, then he will consider running for office. And there isn't anybody else. It's Reynolds. It's I'm not saying the name right. Northland, Secretary of Agriculture, Northfield. Art, what is it? Northey. Thank you. I don't know. The Brad Zahn Show is coming up next, and there will be some state legislators that will be glad to put their opinion into the wing. And these guys are a lot smarter than I am about this stuff, so pay attention to that. That's coming up next, right now, here on webcast1live.com. We'll see you tomorrow. My guest will be Michael Damascus as we prepare for the Real Men Conference tomorrow night at the Rising Sun Church in Altoona from 7 to 10. If you're a guy, please come. Bring your son. Bring your grandson. If he's over 12 or 13, it'll make a huge difference in his life. It's just guys getting together, talking about Jesus, talking about how we can make a difference in this life as men. And as men, we start out as sons. We start out as grandsons. Sometimes we start out as fathers. We don't realize what it's like to be a man until we have our own child in our arms. Sometimes it's when we're grandfathers. Whatever it is, Jesus is there, and he wants to train you, and he wants to teach you, and he wants to love you. So be at the Real Men Conference. That's tomorrow night, 7 to 10, Rising Sun Church in Altoona. Until then, I'm J. Michael McCoy. Thanks for listening. I love this job, and I couldn't do it without you. And all I ask you to do is one thing for me between now and tomorrow at 3 when we meet. Just one. Just one. Pray.